Hello and welcome to your notes on hearing and audition. These will be a lot shorter than our vision notes, but kind of structured the same way in that you need to know some basic structures of your ear, but more importantly, what that has to do with perceiving sound. So how it travels, how sound travels through my ear and then makes a sound or registers as a sound in my brain. Just like we talked about how light travels through my eyes and I visually perceive it. Okay, so hearing. Hearing is called audition. All right, so this is the audition is the is hearing, right? So being able to hear sound. All right, and we do that in a couple different ways, similar to our light waves. So we have our amplitude, frequency, and pitch. So remember, just with like our light waves, imagine now instead of a light wave that this is a sound wave. All right. Now frequency is if I had a line right here saying how frequent a sound wave is how many times it passes this line in a given time period, right? So maybe it's 100 per second, or maybe it's 50 per second. So frequency is how long it takes or how many waves pass over this line in a given time. All right, my pitch is going to be my distance between these two. So high pitches are going to have low or high frequency. Okay, so a pitch, so a high frequency would be like really close together, right? This would be a high pitch. Okay, so a high pitch is going to be close together, versus a low pitch has low amount of frequency. So a low pitch would be like that. Okay, so my frequency determines my pitch. So high pitched sounds, like really think like really high, versus low pitched sounds are going to be lower, and that is determined by like basically my wavelength or how many times it passes by. Now both of those have amplitude. So amplitude is my loudness. So I'm looking at from here to here how loud a sound is. So I can have high pitched sounds that are really loud, and then low pitched sounds that are really loud. Okay, so it's looking at my amplitude or distance from here to here. Okay, now we're going to look at the structure of your ear and talk about how sound stimulus goes in and makes registers in your brain. Okay, so here's the structure of my ear. Now the ear is divided into three different categories. You have your outer ear, your middle ear, and your inner ear. And your outer ear kind of goes, it still looks like back to here. This is like we're to the point where you can like put a Q-tip into, okay? So they tell you not to put a Q-tip too far into your ear because you could damage your middle ear. But this is about the place where like a Q-tip will stop, like right about here, okay? So it's divided into three parts. I've got my outer, my middle, and my inner ear. Now, my outer ears made of my auditory canal. So you think of like a canal, kind of like a water passageway. And this way, it's where sound waves are going to move through. So my sound waves travel down this auditory canal to my eardrum, which is located right here. So an eardrum is this really tight membrane. Think of like a cell membrane or like a plastic lining that vibrates when it's struck with sound. So you can think of like the outer casing of like a drum is a really tight membrane, and every time sound or air compression hits the eardrum, it vibrates or it moves back and forth. Now here's the structure of my ear a little bit closer. So we're looking at this area right here up close. So I have my eardrum here, I have my sound waves coming in and it hits my eardrum, remember, and that's really thin membrane right here. Now from my eardrum, I have in the middle of my ear three things: a hammer, anvil, and stirrup. And you might know from like your biology class, so those are the three bones that make up my middle ear. Okay, so the bones of my middle ear are located right here, and they vibrate with the eardrum. So you can think of that tight membrane that vibrates, and then right behind that, you have your three bones that vibrate as well. So those sound waves are compressing air, and it physically makes something move. It makes your membrane move, your eardrum, and then the bones of your middle ear. So here they are again. So here's my hammer here. Here's my anvil, and here is my stirrup. You will never need to look at these and be able to identify them. You just need to know the three of them and that they're the bones versus the membrane. So see how they kind of work together, my hammer, anvil, and then stirrup, and they kind of look like their names, all right? Now my stirrup ends on something called the oval window. And the oval window, it's where the stirrup connects to the cochlea. And the cochlea is, we'll talk about a little bit later, but this is where really that physical stimulus starts to become more of a neural impulse, right? So the physical moving of the bones and the membrane, and that stirrup ends on something called the oval window, and this is where it connects to the cochlear nerve, all right? So it's a coiled, bony, fluid-filled tube with the inner tear, and this is where really I just said that the nerve impulse begins. Okay, so there's fluid in the middle of your ears, and this is very important for hearing. It's also important for balance. I don't know if we talked about that earlier, but the fluid that fills up your cochlea, so coiled, so it goes like this, bony, and then it's filled with fluid, and this is what's going to trigger my nerve impulse, so where it actually starts going back to my brain. Now, the inner ear, we said that's made of the window, the oval window, and the cochlea. And then my basilar membrane, and this is where my auditory nerve and my auditory cortex are going to start playing. So look at right here. So let me actually draw this for you. So my oval window right here, okay, and then my cochlea, this is my coil filled right here. Remember, it's filled with like fluids that vibrate as well, and you can see their pathway. So it comes up this way and goes that way. And then your auditory nerves end here. All right, so you can see how they kind of go to different places in the cochlea. Right here. They kind of like the dendrites all end on there. And this is what's going to go back up here. So all these combine right here to make my nerve. And this is going to go back to my auditory cortex. All right, if you remember your auditory cortex, where that's at, think about that it's near your ears. Okay, so your temporal lobe. So remember that my auditory cortex is near my ears and my temporal lobe. Sorry, I keep accidentally stopping the recording. Okay, so here's my structure of my ear again that I just pointed out to you. I have my cochlea here. I have my nerve endings here. And now let's kind of go back and you can label it on your diagram. So I have my partially uncoiled. That goes back, the motion of the fluid in the cochlea is what starts the protruding hair cells to send my, to send my nerve endings back. So there's these little hair cells in here as well, and that's what kind of stimulates the nerval impulse going back. Okay, so my auditory nerve, that's the big bundle that sends the auditory message to the brain via the thalamus. So remember, our thalamus is our sensory input that decides where it should go. So from my thalamus, that's what would decide that this is a sound, and it's going to send it to my auditory cortex. Okay, so here's the diagram. I probably mixed these two up. So here are my nerve fibrings here, and there's my hair cell, and those are actually called the nerve fibers. So these little like uncoiled pieces are my nerve fibers that go back to my auditory nerve. Right there, I already drew that out for you. And then that last step is that it goes up to my thalamus, and then from my thalamus, then it goes to my auditory cortex and my temporal lobe. So everything I just said is now right here. Okay, so the ear perceiving loudness. So now let's go talk about that page before the first slide where I showed you the amplitude, the frequency, and the pitch. So how do those things make different sounds in my ear? And that really has a lot to do with these hair cells that we talked about earlier that line the cochlea. They're called the basilar membrane hair cells, and they're the ones that compress the sound. All right, so sound is compressed, like you can think of like it kind of like a wave running into something, and it actually makes those hair vibrates in different ways, and that's how we perceive different loudness. So if my hair is vibrating a little bit, it's a really quiet sound. If my hairs are vibrating a lot, that creates a loud sound. Okay, now the different types of loud sounds, here's a kind of chart for you. We measure those in something called decibels. And you might have seen this before, like on your radio, or I don't know where you would have seen this, maybe physics. But our absolute threshold of hearing decibels is about 0, all right? A whisper is about 20 decibels, all right? Our normal conversation is about 60, and a busy street corner is going to be 80. Now, anything above that is where we kind of get to be like, it's really loud, all right? And any prolonged exposure to anything that could cause hearing loss. So a subway train at 20 feet, you can take that for a little bit, but if I have prolonged exposure to it, it could cause hearing loss. A jet plane at 500 feet, loud thunder, 120, and then a rock band amplified at close range is 140. Okay, so long exposure to those could cause hearing loss at loud decibels. All right, So now how do we actually find sound or perceive of sound? We talked about pitch earlier, but there's actually two different theories, just like there was in color with the trichromatic and then the light theory. So in here we call those two different theories either place theory or frequency theory. Now place theory, do I have a picture of this? Hold on just a second. Okay, here's a picture I was looking for. So place theory versus frequency theory. So place theory, really this is going to be our explanation for high-pitched sounds. And what that is saying is that, so if I have a sound or a bell ringing over here, it would compress the air in different ways, and then depending on where it is place-wise in my periphery, it would actually vibrate in the cochlea different. So there would actually be some different vibrations of high-pitched sounds, and that would send a different sensation to my brain. So talking about like a bell ringing versus a bird chirping versus a train coming, so how those different pitches associate with different things in my brain. Now this does not account for low-pitched sounds. All right, so it's kind of like there was like these holes in this place theory. And so that's where the frequency theory came in. And the frequency theory talks about that different sounds have different frequencies, and that whatever the frequency is of the sound coming in, that's the same frequency that my neural impulses are sent at. All right, so that's kind of different. So if I have a frequency coming in like this, right, so it's a certain time between this, then when it hit my ear, I'll draw an ear right here, and then goes up to the nerve, that frequency would continue at the same speed there. All right, so that's my frequency theory. Versus if my place theory, what that shows is, see like how the ear is right here. So I would have different places in my ear that are like hit with, oh my gosh, what did I just do? Okay, good. So it would go with different places in the ear would vibrate differently because of the place it is in my periphery. All right, so here's these two theories actually written out for you in case that last slide totally confused you. So my place theory, so links the pitch we hear to the place it is in the membrane that's stimulated, right? So the different places are stimulated at different areas, and that gives us pitch, and then we take that pitch and we say, oh, that was a bird, or that was a car. The frequency theory is saying that the rate of the neural impulse matches the frequency of a tone. So whatever the frequency is of the sound wave, that's going to be the frequency that our neural impulses are sent up. Now, we actually have a combination of both of these because there's holes in both theories. So our current explanation of audition or hearing actually accounts for both place theory and frequency theory. Okay. So how we locate sounds in our environment. So we do something called stereophonic hearing. So look at phonic means sound, stereo means like place. And this is how our brain locates sounds, all right? So hearing and place, meaning that we know that things that come from really far away or close up, our brain's able to tell where something is depending on its sound. Okay, so how we localize sounds. We do this in two ways. So the intensity of the wave coming in, and then the speed of the sound. So we know that things that are farther away take longer to get to us, and things that are closer up have a higher intensity. All right, so last slide, let's look at our hearing loss. So what happens if all these things go wrong? There's two ways you can possibly lose hearing or have some type of audition impairment. There's conduction hearing loss and sensorineural hearing loss. So conduction hearing loss is where you have something actually structurally damaged. So you rupture the membranes or you break a bone somehow. That's conduction. There's something structurally wrong with your ear. The sensorineural hearing loss is when there's some type of nerve damage, either from age or some type of disease, where the nerves are damaged. So there's nothing wrong structurally with your ear, but the nerves are somehow impaired. And there's something right now that is called a cochlea implant. And these are for people that are, well, anyone can have one with hearing loss, but they're especially, prevalent in children that are born without hearing. And it's actually this, it's an implant, just kind of like a prosthetic, that's actually put into the ear. It looks like this. And it actually allows people who are born deaf to be able to hear things and then be able to speak. So a lot of the times people that are never able to hear, often have a really hard time speaking, because think about how would you speak if you've never heard words before. And then we're going to talk about signing in class, because these are actually pretty controversial. You would think, I don't know. When I read that they were controversial, I didn't understand why. But this cochlea implant right here is a controversial issue in the signing world, and we'll talk about that and read about that in class. Okay, so that concludes our notes on Audition. Make sure you're practicing your Quizlet vocab, and I will see you later.